Hello and welcome to my video on transposition and modulation. Today we're going to be looking at the art of changing key, as well as why you might want to do such a thing. Modulation and transposition is a very common thing that happens in music. Transposition is a more behind the scenes sort of idea, whereas modulation can happen within a piece itself. Either way, both things are dealt with in exactly the same way, so let's delve right into how you go about changing a key. Transposition is the process of taking an entire work and putting it into a new key. You change the pitch of all the notes, but the relationship the notes have with each other remain the same. Modulation, on the other hand, is the process of changing key midway through a piece. The reasons as to why you might want to do either of these are numerous, and I'm going to talk about them more a little bit later in the video, but first we'll talk about how you go about changing key. Firstly, let's talk about how we go about changing key. To explain myself, I'm going to be using the circle of fifths as a reference. The circle of fifths is a diagram that musicians can use to explain and understand many harmonic theories and patterns. I won't explain everything, as the uses of this diagram are endless, but for the purposes of this video, it serves as a great learning tool. It is a summation of many rules that are the foundation of common practice Western music, and composers can either use the circle of fifths effectively, or they can break the rules, either for deliberate effect, to intentionally go against previously established rules that have been used for hundreds of years, or through plain ignorance. However, whether works obey all the many rules that the circle of fifths represents, as long as a piece uses the 12 notes used in the current Western scales, then they can at least be applied to the circle when thinking about key changes. Today we're going to look at how notes relate to each other on the circle, and then how we can change key using that information. The diagram shows that for any note, to the right of it can be found its most important partner. The chord to the right is known as the dominant, as a piece in any key will feature the key chord, the most frequently used one in the entire piece, and then the dominant, the chord to the right, appears the next most frequently. Go back to the tonic chord and then look to the chord to the left, and you find the subdominant, the third most common chord in pieces. Back and then down one takes you to the most commonly used minor key in a piece of music, and then if you look inside the inner circle, you'll find similar patterns in minor keys. So let's say you're in the key of C, and you have that dominant and subdominant relationship, the C and the F and the G. But now let's say, for whatever reason, we'll come back to the reasons on why you might want to key change in a minute, let's say you want to be in the key of A major. Well, we know that the key chord, the tonic, the chord that the key is named after, is going to be A, because we just said that, we want it to be in A. As we know, the chord moving round clockwise is its dominant, and anti-clockwise is subdominant. So what you have to do is take the passage of music in the original key and swap out the chords for the new ones. All the tonics go from the old one to the new one, in this example C to A. Then all the dominants are swapped, G to E, and so forth. And that's it, you've changed key. This principle works for any chord and key, no matter how distantly they are related. Let's take C and C sharp for example. Although they're next to each other in the musical alphabet, and therefore next door in terms of frets, they are quite distantly related, as you can see on the circle of fifths. Regardless of this though, some songs in C can have a C sharp in after all, but you would just still have to count around the cycle and work out their distance before working out the chord in the new key. One way to think of it is to cut out some holes on some paper and rotate the circle around, but no matter how closely related certain chords and notes are or not, you can always use the circle in some form to change to another key. Now we know how to change key, let's look at some of the uses of key changes and further distinguish the difference between transposition and modulation. Transposition, as I said before, is the process of changing an entire piece and putting it into a new key. The reasons you might want to do this are numerous, but they can include things such as, like, if you have a lead singer, for example, so the original piece, the original song is done in a particular key that doesn't quite match your particular vocalist's vocal range, then they may ask you to change the key of your accompaniment on the ukulele so that it better suits her vocal range and her upper and lower limits. Furthermore, songs written in strange or difficult keys can be made easier for instruments such as the ukulele. Easy keys on the uke include C, G and F, So a song in F sharp, for example, a uke player might want to take it down to the key of F to make it more manageable on the fingers. Additionally, if I'm playing a set and I notice that I've got a lot of songs that are in the same key, I'll either try and rework it so that there aren't any two consecutive songs in the same key, or maybe I'll transpose it, even just by up a semitone, just to give some variety. Audiences tend to get bored when you play in the same few keys, especially maybe a small handful of keys that share lots of chords. For example, the keys of C, F and G have a lot of crossover. So I like to mix things up a bit, and maybe I'll do one song in B flat and then the next one in F sharp or something, just to give some variety. Finally, as a composer, when you have a musical idea, you might want to try it out in various different keys and seeing how the different keys affect the quality and the colour of your melodies. You see, different keys have different qualities about them. Some of these qualities can be a personally felt thing. Some people feel that different keys do different things for them. But there are also some wider opinions about what different keys contribute. So, for example, Mozart, when he was writing lots of tension, lots of dramatic pieces, he'd often compose in G minor. I know Jacob Collier quite likes the key of A to give a sense of openness and space in his music. I quite like the key of A as well, although the key of F doesn't really do much for me. One big use of transposition is in the way that different instruments are actually tuned. Most instruments prefer keys like C or G, but horns like the trumpet or the clarinet find B flat, E flat and F easier to play in, just because of the physics of the instrument. This is why lots of jazz music is in flat keys, because most of the instruments in jazz bands, big bands, loads of horns, they find it easy to play in these keys, just like how a lot of ukulele music's written in C. However, while these keys, B flat, E flat, F, etc., are easier to play physically, thinking in terms of these keys is often quite tricky, especially for a beginner, because you can easily get confused when talking about all the flats and sharps and things you have to think about. To make things mentally easier, therefore, the instruments will actually write their music a tone higher, but still play the notes that they find easier. Therefore, when a clarinet plays what is written as a C on paper, they're actually playing a B flat. This means that transposing instruments have to be written higher or lower depending on what degree they transpose by. If you look at a score written for big band that fundamentally is in the key of C, the pianos and banjos are in C, also known as concert pitch, but the clarinets and trumpets will be written in D to compensate for the gap in between them. Likewise, saxophones are E flat, horns are F, alto flute in G, and there are many others too. Being aware of these differences is just something that can help you as a composer if you're intending to mix instruments. Different ukuleles can be even tuned differently. For example, in Britain in the 1920s, 30s and 40s, when these things were really popular, often the tuning wasn't G, C, E, A, it was actually a tone or 2 frets higher. A, D, F sharp, B. This is because when these things were around, well, these were invented to project, to be loud, and on a string instrument at least, the higher your tuning, the more the instrument projects, and so these were tuned in what's known as D tuning. Artists like George Formby play around with these tunings, and you'll still get people such as in the George Formby Society who still tune their ukes to D in order to continue the tradition of their namesake. Other ukuleles that are tuned differently include baritones. This is my new one. You can see I've just recently restrung it. This is tuned a fourth lower than a concert pitch ukulele, such as these two. D, G, B, E, D, G, B, E. So even though you have the same shape again, that might normally look like a G7 and a C, this is actually a D7 and a G. String out the way. So again, these ukuleles are tuned differently. Now normally, actually, to be honest, you will find chord charts for baritone ukuleles that have the correct name for the chord. So you'll find a chord chart where that is listed as a G. This is different to what I've just been talking about with clarinets and stuff, where it will be written, say, as a C, but the sound will be a B flat. So in some sense the baritone ukulele isn't really a transposing instrument, it's just tuned differently. But nevertheless I thought I'd bring that up. Transposition can also help you as a performer when live on stage too. The tonic, dominant and subdominant chord patterns that I've been on about can be given a numeric value to help us understand patterns within chords. The tonic is called 1, seeing as that's the key chord, and all the other chords are given a number based on how close they are to chord 1. The dominant is 5 because it's 5 away alphabetically, C, D, E, F, G. The subdominant is 4, and so on. In fact, for each degree of a scale, a chord can be built up from it, and each can be assigned a number describing its relationship to the tonic. Now we have these numbers, we can start to create some patterns. Songs that use the 12-bar blues pattern will see something that looks a little bit like this. Most blues, rock and roll and jazz tunes either look like or are exactly this pattern. The reasons as to this pattern's popularity I won't discuss too much, but essentially it's really common because of just how jammable it is. It's simple, easy to remember, and is great for performing solos over, no matter what genre. Now, as a performer in a jam group, it's a lot easier to just call out 12-bar blues for people to sing and solo over than it is to describe in detail what will happen in exactly each bar, especially when it's all verbal and you're not writing anything down. All you have to do is give a key, say G, and everybody should instantly know all the chords they need, because all they have to do is substitute the numbers for the chords that match the key of G, and there you go. A repeatable cycle that is easy to perform and work out on the fly. It's so easy that I've seen loads of artists leave a simple jam in G as an encore or a filler spot in case they're short of time. A slightly more complex example of a progression that uses numbers is there are a lot of jazz progressions such as the 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. Now that sounds like a lot of numbers for somebody to memorise when they're called out at a jam session. But it's really common, and it's so common in fact that when you start calling out the name, most people probably know what you're going to say before you finish the name. It's such a common progression that you learn it so easily. Let's do this example in the key of G to start with. If we substitute the numbers for the chords that relate to G, you get this circuit of chords. This circuit of chords might look slightly daunting and alien to you, but if we transpose it into the key of C, you might instantly recognise this chord progression as though some of those chords that everyone plays, that song 5'2", all those songs. Add the sevenths and there you have it. And I can pretty much guarantee that any ukulele player, especially anyone who's gone to a jam, has played this chord progression in some form or another. It's just that popular. It's worth pointing out that any extensions in transposition, any sevenths or types like minor, they all stay the same. It's just the letters that change when changing key. So E minor will always transpose to another minor chord, for example. The reason that learning patterns is important is because you can easily digest and memorise them all, as well as work them out on the fly. So you give someone, say, a 2-5-1 progression in the key of B flat. Well, you know 1 is B flat, so you just have to work out what 2 and 5 are on the spot just by counting. So B flat C, and then B flat C, D, E, F. Really simple, and you can work that out if your brain's fast enough on the fly. And it means you don't have to be looking at a sheet of paper that covers your face. Because obviously when you're performing you want to be engaging with your audience, you want to look them in the eye like I'm doing now. Alternatively, you might want to be looking at what you're doing, looking at your frets when you're maybe doing a solo, or even just looking at some technical work, or indeed looking at other members of the band, because like a band leader who will give a cue for when something should happen. So being able to memorise stuff in a sort of transposition type way of thinking about things is a really useful tool, and I really recommend you if you play songs that use these really common progressions, you will start to learn them more quickly, and you'll start to be able to notice patterns between different songs and then be able to play them. It's a really useful way of thinking about music. Moving on to modulation now. This is a much more audible thing in music because modulation is the change of key within a piece itself. More common in classical music, where pieces can be anywhere between 5 minutes to 2 hours long, people can get bored of staying in one key, and so composers will often subtly change the key of their pieces so that people are interested, so that they don't lose attention. Once a piece is established in a tonic key and its melodies are predictable, then the composer can go in any direction he likes. Now, a composer will normally go to a more closely related key on the circle of fifths, either to a neighbour key, such as the dominant or subdominant, or to the relative minor. these the key signatures between these all these keys are very similar, and so any change between them is very subtle, and it's not highlighted. The listener won't necessarily go, "Ah, there's a key change happening here." It'll happen subtly and gradually, because there'll only be a few notes different between each key signature. However, as time went on, classical composers modulated to physically close keys, such as keys on a keyboard, such as the tertiary modulation, where you only modulate up by a third rather than a whole fifth or a sixth. Pop music also features modulation that is quite different to classical styles. As the song reaches its climax and the chorus is being repeated over and over, the piece has simply got nowhere else to go, and so to avoid it being tiresome, composers will often put the chorus up into a key that is just one or two semitones away, despite being opposite ends of the circle of fifths. These alphabetically similar key changes are easier for guitarists, keyboards, ukulelists, because the keys are right next to each other when playing on the instrument. The distance between the keys is audibly quite large though, and so this type of modulation is really obvious and sticks out to an audience, perhaps to say, "No, don't go yet, there's still some more left. Keep listening to find out what happens next." I hope you found this video interesting. If you've enjoyed it, why not like, share and subscribe? That really helps me out. It just takes you, 5 seconds? And I'd be really grateful. I'm trying to get to 200 subscribers before the end of July, so please tell your friends about this video. Alternatively, you can support me on Patreon if you want to get these videos early, as well as get some extra bonus behind the scenes content. Then pledge a few pounds a month to get all those extra goodies. Or you can leave a tip at my PayPal, the link is in the description below. Don't forget to check out my website, www.matthewquilliam.co.uk, and like the Matthew Quilliam Music Facebook page as well. Thank you so much. I hope you found lots of tips and things you can use in your playing and your composing, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you.